Hey guys, we have another episode of Is It Legit? And today we're going to be addressing something that is a huge problem here in America. And it's the reason why we have just so much dissension here. I think the biggest topic right now, I mean, there's the various topics like vaccine versus no vaccine, left versus right, gender equality, whatever, right? But the biggest one we see on the headlines is Stop Asian Hate. So, you recently just read an article about something in regard to that, right?
Yeah, the media has been focusing a lot on this recently, and this morning I saw that a man uh, driving through New York City, I think it was Chinatown, with his two kids in the back. And I thought about this because I have two kids now, and he was just driving through the city in Chinatown, and some guy just got out of his car, was calling him racial slurs, and like punched him through the window. So
Wow.
imagine just you're driving with your kids, I don't know, going to grocery store, whatever,
Yeah.
and you see some guy get out of his car, calls you, whatever, and he punches you and he just takes off. I mean,
Yeah.
and of course I've heard of like grandmothers getting hit, and you know, um, so that's just that just makes me think. Well, how do you get to the point, okay, from this guy who punched this gentleman? How does he get from where he was in life to doing what he did? Because obviously that's not a normal thing to do. To get out of a car and to like go up to your window and punch you in the face,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, see, and that's the thing. It's like, why do people do the things that they do? And I don't believe a lot of people, I think one of the biggest issues right now is that not a lot of people take a step back and try to figure out why people do what they do. All they do, what people normally do, is simply just hate the guy. Because that's what I could do. I could just simply be like, that guy's a horrible person. I could take it a next step. I can go over there and try to find this guy and beat him up. Go find him and beat him up, right? Because that's kind of like the it almost seems like that's kind of the dynamic that the world wants us to
Right. Yeah.
feel. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? But that doesn't work for the masses, right? That's going to basically just create war and dissension and more chaos and dystopia within America. So that's obviously not the right answer. So getting back to what you're saying, it's like, okay, why did the taking a step back and figuring why did the person do what he did? Well, maybe. So I'm just going to say maybe because I'm literally creating scenarios. But what if, like, this guy had 5 to 10 Asian males ended up jumping him and his family, beating him up, and saying because he was a white male, right? What if? And that's just kind of the thing. It's like, have we ever thought about, like, we love to judge people. It gives us endorphins to criticize people because it boosts our ego and it lowers other people's egos. But have you ever thought, like, what if, like, why would someone do this? Like, what if this person, let's just say, 5 to 10 of his family members died, closest people to him, they all died because of the coronavirus. Now, Ch- it's obviously not Asians who caused the coronavirus, right? It's like, we didn't do the coronavirus. Maybe I don't know. Again, like, the Chinese government created the coronavirus, but it wasn't like the Chinese people. It's not their fault, right? But in their mind, at least taking that step to think, like, okay, maybe in their mind they're doing this because they got really hurt by this coronavirus. And obviously he's not thinking straight, but he's acting out of emotion because he's attributing the death of his family members to Asian people, putting the two and two together.
I mean, as you're saying that, the two things that I think of is are two questions that I ask myself all the time, right? And I would encourage everybody to do so as well, which is number one, when you're in an emotional confrontation,
Hmm.
and emotions don't have to be hate; it could just be a misunderstanding, right? Can you pick up some groceries for me? And you're like, man, I just had a 12-hour day. You're gonna ask me. This is the tape. It's the film. Sorry, this the film that's running inside your head.
Yeah.
Man, I spent 12 hours at the hospital, and you're asking me to get groceries. You say no. Well, then I'm like, I just asked you to. So you can see how this kind of just escalates. So the question is, how are you handling those emotional conversations and situations in your life, right? What are some techniques that you're implementing as things are getting heated, right? It could be negotiating for a house, which we do every single day, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Or it could be negotiating for your kid to take a freaking bath, right? I mean, it's emotional.
Parents right now are crying.
It's
all across whoever's watching.
why
the
can't I
world.
have candy before my dinner, Daddy?
Yeah.
Why? Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't want to yell.
You're getting dude. Bring it down.
Sorry. Okay, what's my technique?
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. How are you handling these emotional confrontations over and over and over again? The second thing is, how are you debriefing yourself after those things happen to put you back on the right track?
Right.
What Peter's saying about, the five guys beating this person, that could be true or could not be true. But the point is the outcome doesn't matter. What matters is that Peter took the time to debrief himself and say, you know what, this guy did come at me today,
Right.
right?
Right.
So now I'm just, rather than leading himself to the path of, I'm just going to hate everybody who looks like him now. And I'm
Yeah.
going to go march with signs. Not that that's a bad thing,
Yeah.
but you chose to debrief yourself in a way that said, okay, let's try to have some empathy. Let's try to think outside the box and say, what would have led this guy to do this to me in the first place?
Yeah.
And I think if we look at the people in our lives, and I think we all know somebody who just has a lot of hate, a lot of anxiety, a lot of distrust or mistrust in people, I think you'll find that they are not bad people. They just don't understand how to handle emotional confrontations really well. And I was one of them, right? And they don't understand how to debrief themselves out of the spiral that leads them to this conclusion. And then just hate begets hate.
Well,
right?
the guy, the white gentleman who punched the Asian guy, he probably didn't debrief because he didn't
Yeah.
really take the time because he's just wallowing in hate. He didn't really take the time to realize that this Asian guy. I mean, I don't know why he punched him. Right? Maybe it was
Who
because of the
knows?
coronavirus.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
It's like if he just took the time realizing that this Asian male with his two kids are completely innocent, like there's no association there, then he probably wouldn't have punched him, right? So I think you bring up some pretty good points, like the emotion. Like first of all, acting out of emotion doesn't help. They say I don't know if it's 120 beats per minute. It's in the hundreds, I believe, where if you get to a certain emotional state, like emotional level, then you're not going to make rational decisions. So even in an argument with your
Yeah,
spouse,
makes
they
sense.
say this is Gottman actually. If you guys know John Gottman, he's a marriage counselor, like really well known. He says that if you get to a certain emotional state, then you're not going to make rational decisions or having rational discussions. So take yourself back down, bring yourself back down to a lower emotional state so you can start speaking rationally and having an actual result or a conclusion within your conversation.
Yeah,
Right.
and to piggyback off of that, just to understand physiology. So, and if your adrenaline's firing, you know when your adrenaline's firing.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah. I mean, you know that's already it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not gonna end well.
You could, yeah.
Oh really? Like then it's just not. You shouldn't. You should just back away. But then when the adrenaline fires, they say your peripheral vision. So if you can look here and you can see what's happening here, that's peripheral vision, right? Your vision actually just narrows and
Oh,
you
wow.
see this single point because you're focusing on the enemy,
Wow.
or
wow.
or you're in
That's
a
really good.
fight or flight state. So heart rate, adrenaline firing, you're not in a good state to make influence and change.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's really good.
So so when I see you interact with like even customer service people, I mean, we've all called customer service people,
Yeah.
and when they don't care or they're having a bad day. They've helped like 20 irate people before you.
Yeah.
I used to sell phones at AT&T, so I mean, I know what it's like. But I see you having really good interactions with people, and the way you enter into a conversation might not be the best because they're having a crappy day.
Yeah.
but I always consistently see you leading those conversations out of the bad and into the good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you were to break that down for people, what are the two parts to how to enter into those kinds of situations?
Yeah, exactly. So that would be the next kind of the next step, which is to empathize. So the saying that we one of the best books I've read is Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. He says to diagnose before you prescribe.
Yeah.
Diagnose as in figure out like why exactly you are feeling these things, right? So we are constantly like even a customer service representative is like just not really wanting to help us, like really try to ask them about like what if you ask them about their day, or try to figure out like, oh, that sounds really frustrating, like that you have to deal with this all day long. People feel a lot better when they feel acknowledged, listened to. And the thing is, if you don't take the first step of diagnosing before you take the second step, prescribing, you're not going to get good results in the prescribing part, right? You're not, and that's what people do. I used to, when I in the beginning of my career, I used to just kind of like I used to just like be the irate one, right? Like scream at people to try to get the results that I wanted. And what I realized is that is not anywhere near effective.
Nobody cares, honestly, if you just tell people what to do.
It,
Nobody cares.
it will work for some people, like people who just bully people into getting what they want. But man, I'll tell you, a much more powerful technique is to really learn how to be empathetic with people. Empathy being you putting yourselves in their shoes, and to really listen to them first, figure out what's really going on, and then do step number two.
Okay, so
So.
how do you empathize with people?
So one of the best techniques I've learned from Never Split the Difference, and then another FBI book that I highly recommend would be to, one of the simplest techniques is to mirror people. Guys, use this in your daily lives. The next person you speak with, use this. Simply, when the person's speaking, simply mirror what they're saying. So the person says, hey, I'm really having trouble with my boss. And you just say, oh, you're having trouble with your boss? It's as simple as that. Oh, you're having trouble. Just say exactly what they said back to you. And so for anybody who struggles with like, being a good conversationalist or being social, you don't have to know everything. That's a fallacy. You just need to know how to simply mirror what people say.
Yeah. Get people to talk, because when people talk, they start firing their dopamine. And
Exactly.
like for those of you out there that, because I used to get this a lot, I used to just listen to people, because honestly, I didn't have much to say. I was like, what do I say to sound witty and funny? And I would just get people to talk, and then they would say, oh, I really like this guy. I want to
Yeah.
introduce you to other people. And I'm like, oh. And I never really understood what that was, but it's really, the principle is, if you say or do things that are like other people, and especially when you get them to talk and about themselves, because people love talking about themselves. Studies have shown that you will literally fire dopamine.
Yep.
Which is the same thing when you eat candy, when you do cocaine. Like, it's the same thing. It's just small bursts or big bursts, right?
Yep.
When you win at something, when you make a basket or whatever, it's the same like stuff that's going on in your head. And that's a technique. Mirroring is a huge technique.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's another part to that. So we know how effective it is. Another part to that is to do emotional labeling. So now you're mirroring, like, oh, you're having trouble with your boss. You could take it a next step, be like, it sounds like you're really frustrated with your boss. You're really angry with your boss. You're labeling what emotions they are feeling, and they're gonna instantly feel connected to you. So again, like with this whole theme of all this dissension within America, stop Asian hate, and vaccine versus no vaccine, or left versus right. Like, how do you get a left person from the political left to get along with the political right? Let's just say you and I are on different sides. Well, if you ever want to influence someone to come into your side, unless you just want to argue, which you're not helping anybody at that point. You have to really learn how to listen to them, to mirror them, to do emotional labeling, and then you could prescribe your side of the story. But here's the thing, as you are taking that first step, sometimes, at least for me, as I am really actively listening to people, I actually get convinced. I actually change my mind because they say things from their vantage point that I didn't necessarily think of. And that's the beauty and that's the power and that's the answer to the problem that I believe we're having in America, is that we're not willing to listen to the other party, really actively listen rather than just wanting to tell people our points. We're not willing to listen to their side of the story.
If I
So,
can, and this is how we have our success, right? This is how we get things done. We have multiple businesses that we run. We have rental properties. I actually just started a racing team, and I mean, there's all these things that we do, and everything comes back to how are we creating emotional rapport with people so
yeah,
that they can help us get to our goal. Because we don't live in a vacuum. We live with other people that we need to help us get to where we want to go.
yeah,
I mean, to illustrate, I guess, an example of how two ways that a conversation can go, right? Like, let's say, like, I remember having this, so we play basketball with a bunch of people, bunch of friends outside in a court nearby. And this came up where people were talking about masks.
oh yeah,
Do we
big
wear
topic.
masks or do we not wear masks?
Yeah,
And I think really easy example is if the conversation didn't go well, it would look something like this. Let's say you are for masks and I am against masks, right?
mm,
I would say, you know what? It's outside. It's outside. It's okay. It's sunny. I feel like I'm restricted, and I don't want to play with my mask on.
yeah,
And then you could simply say, you know what? That's wrong. The CDC, said that you have to maintain social distancing,
right,
and that could just end like that. But then a conversation that you have built emotional rapport around could look like, you know, John, you're telling me, John, I'm all about wearing masks because a family member actually passed away
yeah,
because they weren't socially distanced or they went outside when they shouldn't have, right?
right.
So where he's coming from, and that's actually a true story. Like I've heard of people,
Yeah,
and
me
I'm sure
too,
you have
actually.
too,
Yep.
that have literally passed away because of complications due to, lack of social distancing or whatever it might be. They went to a party or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's the difference. It doesn't necessarily change our stance. Like you could still be pro and whatever.
Yeah.
But now I understand where you're coming from at a much deeper level,
Yes.
and it humanizes you to me. Because you know what? I have family too that I've lost, right?
Yeah.
When you get to a certain age, you lose people.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I have a much deeper understanding of where you're coming from,
Yeah.
and I want to learn more, and I want to hear you out more. Okay, tell me more. I will. Then we can agree to disagree, and that doesn't resolve some problem necessarily, but it creates rapport and trust and love for our fellow human beings, right? And the people that we live with, our kids, our parents. And to me, that's I think what the point of this all is.
Yeah, if people were so
So
much more like if they really took the time to rather than just saying each other's points, just really just asking questions and spending 20 minutes just to ask questions about each other's point of view, our society would live so much more peaceably than the way we do now. And it's with everybody. Like we just love judging in this day and age, right? And social media, you see it all the time. Like when you see someone cut you off, right? Like we immediately be like, "Oh, this person's an a-hole," right? But what if that person was literally like his wife was dying, got like stabbed or something, and then was literally bringing his wife to the hospital? Or what about I hear a story about this guy on a bus and he had kids that were running wild, screaming and going crazy, and he's not doing anything because he looks super depressed and he's just looking down. And everyone's judging him on the bus. And then one person finally asks, like, hey, what's going on? And the guy just says, we were coming from the hospital. The mother just died. And the kids don't know how to like process their their emotions right now, and I'm just really sad. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like, but everybody judged him without really understanding their situation. So that's why this is such a powerful thing to diagnose, to figure it out first.
Right.
Take the time. It takes longer. This
It
takes
does.
longer.
It does for sure. And in the
Yeah.
beginning, you're impatient. You're like, I just want the freaking result. I just want it to happen.
Yeah.
But in the end, it just doesn't work that way because you have to invest
You have
emotionally in
to.
people.
Yes.
And when people feel understood, going back to the whole customer service thing, like I've had last minute reservations that literally said no refunds, refunded full amounts.
Yeah.
And my wife would say something like, it says no refunds. You're going to call him for what?
Yeah.
Because she's already written, and I'm not saying she's just never learned this side of it.
Yeah.
And she's like, in her mind, she's already written off the result. It's done. The money's gone.
Yep.
But I call, I say, I understand the position you're in,
Right.
right? I
Right.
can only imagine how many crazy people have called you today asking for ridiculous things.
And in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, a lot of people do call me. Yeah, this is really frustrating.
And I'm sure you've
Oh,
heard
this guy
this.
understands me.
Yeah, and then you
It's
can
powerful.
and you can hear them kind of like this, and you can be like, you know what? Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
or
that
they'll laugh.
sigh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I know you've heard this. They'll say, you know what? Just this one time, or you
But
know
we
what?
hear that all the time. See, that's what
I'm
I'm
not
saying.
supposed to do it for you,
Yeah.
but you know what? And then it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't guaranteed anyway, but we've done that person a solid. They feel understood,
Yep.
and in the end, that's what we want too,
Yeah.
right? And that's how we get results. It's increasing the percentage by having certain things that you do, mirroring, emotional labeling. Try it on your wife. Try it on your kids. Try it on your business
Everybody.
partner, your
Everybody.
parents.
Even in negotiations, it works. Again, these are techniques that FBI agents, that the people who teach these FBI agents, this is what they teach. And it's extremely, extremely powerful.
It's powerful because even Chris Voss in this book said, you know what? You're constantly negotiating for every single damn thing.
Yeah.
You really are. Everything you want to do, the vacation hours you want to take off with your boss at this time, or a shift change. I heard my barber talking about having to, try and change shifts with somebody else. And I could already feel the tension rising when they're both talking about how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them were really acknowledging the other person's needs.
Right.
It's like, I just want this, without asking, well, what's going on at that time in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's how I think that's the first step is diagnose before prescribing.
Yeah.
And then maybe next time we can talk about the other part is after you have that, then how do you prescribe and make change and influence?
Right. Right.
So-
But yeah, the general thing is really let's learn with everything that's going on and all this dissension. If we just simply learn how to listen well and to be able to use some of these techniques like active listening, mirroring, emotional labeling, I think our society will get significantly better. If we're all just like, okay, you hurt me, then I'm going to hurt you back, which is kind of what the world is telling us to do. This world is not going to last. We're going to end up in war. So yeah. Thank you guys for joining us on our little podcast, and please like and subscribe. We're going to have more content about business and health and psychology and things of that nature. So thanks guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.